Ishmael Chapter 8, Sections 9 and 10. I'm not quite satisfied with the way we formulated this law, I said. No? We refer to it as a law, but it's actually three laws. Or at any rate, I described it as three laws. The three laws are branches. What you're looking for is the trunk, which is something like, no one species shall make the life of the world its own. Yes, that's what the rule of competition ensures. That's one expression of the law. Here's another. The world was not made for any one species. Yes, then man was certainly not made to conquer and rule it. That's too big a leap. In Taker mythology, the world needed a ruler because the gods had made a mess of it. What they'd created was a jungle, a howling chaos and anarchy. But was it in fact? No, everything was in good order. It was the Takers who introduced disorder into the world. The rule of that law was and is sufficient. Mankind was not needed to bring order to the world. The people of your culture cling with fanatical tenacity to the specialness of man. They want desperately to perceive a vast gulf between man and the rest of creation. This mythology of human superiority justifies their doing whatever they please with the world. Just the way Hitler's mythology of the Aryan superiority justified his doing whatever he pleased with Europe. But in the end, this mythology was not deeply satisfying. The Takers are a profoundly lonely people. The world for them is enemy territory, and they live in it like an army of occupation, alienated and isolated by their extraordinary specialness. That's true, but what are you getting at? Instead of answering my question, Ishmael said, among the levers, crime, mental illness, suicide, and drug addiction are great rarities. How does Mother Culture account for this? I'd say it's because Mother Culture says it's because the levers are just too primitive to have these things. In other words, crime, mental illness, suicide, and drug addiction are features of an advanced culture. That's right. Nobody says it that way, of course, but that's how it's understood. These things are the price of advancement. There's an almost opposite opinion that has had wide currency in your culture for a century or so. An opposite opinion as to why these things are rare among the levers. I thought for a minute. You mean the noble savage theory? I can't say that I know it in any detail, but you have an impression of it. That's what's current in your culture, not the theory in detail, but an impression of it. True, it's the idea that people living close to nature tend to be noble. It's seeing all those sunsets that does it to you. You can't watch a sunset and then go off and set fire to your neighbor's teepee. Living close to nature is wonderful for your mental health. You understand that I'm not saying anything like this. Yes, but what are you saying? We've had a look at the story the Takers have been enacting here for the past 10,000 years. The levers, too, are enacting a story. Not a story told, but a story enacted. What do you mean by that? If you go among the various peoples of your culture, if you go to China and Japan and Russia and England and India, each people will give you a completely different account of themselves, but they are nonetheless all enacting a single basic story, which is the story of the Takers. The same is true of the levers. The Bushmen of Africa, the Alawa of Australia, the Cree and Akore of Brazil, the Navajo of the United States would each give you a different account of themselves, but they too are all enacting one basic story, which is the story of the levers. I see what you're getting at. It isn't the tale you tell that counts, it's the way you actually live. That's correct. The story of the Takers have been enacting here for the past 10,000 years is not only disastrous for mankind and for the world, it's fundamentally unhealthy and unsatisfying. It's a megalomaniac's fantasy, and enacting it has given the Takers a culture riddled with greed, cruelty, mental illness, crime, and drug addiction. Yes, that seems to be so. The story the levers have been enacting here for the past 3 million years isn't a story of conquest and rule. Enacting it doesn't give them power. Enacting it gives them lives that are satisfying and meaningful to them. This is what you'll find if you go among them. They're not seething with discontent and rebellion. not incessantly wrangling over what should be allowed and what forbidden, not forever accusing each other of not living the right way, not living in terror of each other, not going crazy because their lives seem empty and pointless, not having to stupefy themselves with drugs to get through the days, not inventing a new religion every week to give them something to hold on to, not forever searching for something to do or something to believe in that will make their lives worth living. And I repeat, this is not because they live close to nature or have no formal government or because they're innately noble. This is simply because they're enacting a story that works well for people, a story that worked well for 3 million years and that still works well where the takers haven't yet managed to stamp it out. Okay, that sounds terrific. When do we get to that story? Tomorrow. At least we'll begin tomorrow. Good, I said. But before we quit today, I have a question. Why mother culture? I personally have no difficulty with it, but I can imagine some women would, on the grounds that you seem to be singling out a figure of specifically female gender to serve as a cultural villain. Ishmael grunted. I don't consider her a villain in any sense whatever, but I understand what you're getting at. Here's my answer. Culture is a mother everywhere and at every time, because culture is inherently a nurturer, the nurturer of human societies and lifestyles. Among lever peoples, mother culture explains and preserves a lifestyle that is healthy and self-sustaining. Among taker peoples, she explains and preserves a lifestyle that has proven to be unhealthy and self-destructive. Okay, so what's your question? If culture is a mother among the Alawa of Australia and the Bushmen of Africa and the Kayapo of Brazil, then why wouldn't she be a mother among the takers?